All killer and no filler in this one. Less than 24 hours to go before the Game Week 14 waiver deadline, so let's get straight into it. Welcome back to the Draft FC podcast, the podcast website and YouTube channel dedicated to all things official draft FPL. My name is Mitch and I'm your host for another Game Week preview, going over waiver options, hidden gems and general Premier League chat ahead of Game Week 14. Now, if you haven't been paying attention and wondering why there is a pod from me coming out on a Sunday night, well, that's because we've got a midweek game week now with fixtures spread across Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday evening before going straight back into another normal round of fixtures at the weekend on Saturday lunchtime with a usual Friday morning waiver deadline. So I'll say it now, I'll say it again at the end. The waiver deadline this week is Monday at 6 o'clock UK time. So it will be a deadline that many managers out there will forget, even those in quite engaged leagues. And as I always say in these situations, you can easily get ahead simply by staying on the ball, being focused and getting those waivers penciled in nice and early. So for this episode, it's going to be a little bit different to the usual. No waiver watch, no hidden gems, no most hidden gem, just player chat by position. Keep an eye on the predicted lineups. I'll put some effort into trying to guess the rotations. So if you do see any wonky picks or thinking, why on earth is he expecting that player to start? It probably is my prediction, just factoring in, as I said, that a lot of teams, a lot of players are probably only going to play 2 out of 3 games over this kind of 7 or 8 day period, even those that are kind of nailed on. So do keep an eye on those. I'll do those as soon as I've got this video put out. I think for this week, aside from, I say, a very quick whistle-stop tour of some of the players, the predicted lineups are going to almost be more important than anything else, and making sure that you're going to be able to field a full playing 11 for your matchups this week. So I'm recording this on Sunday the 1st of December, so any team news, injury developments or press conference info are up to date as of then, and of course subject to change, but we're going to roll straight into it today without any segment cuts or the usual music or faff. Let's just roll straight on. I will say again, the 1 month free trial code is still running. So you get a 1 month free trial if you sign up for a usual monthly subscription at Draft FC. Just use DFC free 24. So all the picks will be rolled into one for this one, and we'll go position by position. Haven't got any goalkeepers I'm going to bother talking about today, although the Southampton goalkeeper situation is maybe something to keep an eye on. Anyway, let's roll into the defenders, and the first one to mention is Munoz. Now, I put him in the pod a couple of weeks ago now and sort of posed the question of whether or not he could be considered premium as far as defenders go. A non-penalty expected goal involvement of 1.17 for a wing-back is pretty good, which is what he put up yesterday. And it's by no means a fluke. If you've watched him play at all over the last 12 months, you'll have seen him getting into those positions lots and lots. He's more or less rotation-proof, so I'll have him in my predicted lineup for the midweek fixtures. They've got a very nice trip away at Ipswich, who are continuing to struggle. So, yeah, a good fixture for him on paper. A player I have in my main draft team, and really one that I'm looking to play every single week, regardless of who the opposing fixture is now. The next one is Badiashile for Chelsea. Ownership is 0.2% in 10-team leagues. One of the more under-the-radar sick notes at Chelsea in recent months is Wesley Fofana. I think we were lulled into a bit of a false sense of security about how reliable he is, but his hamstrings have got a decent amount of Weetabix in them, like some of the other players there. Badiashile came on today in their game against Villa as a like-for-like replacement. So with Chelsea's fixture run, that potentially puts him as a contender for someone that you might want for a bit of a medium-term hold. There's no guarantee, though. We could still see Tosin or somebody else shuffle around in there. But considering he was the one that came off the bench for that today, he's the one that I'll be having an eye on in some of my teams where I don't have any Chelsea defensive coverage. Next is Wan-Bissaka. Do we have to talk about Wan-Bissaka now? 2 goals in a row. 2 goals, that has to be said, doubles his career goal tally from 2 to 4. So certainly not known for his attacking exploits, but 2 very similar, almost carbon copy goals with nice, latching onto through balls, cutting in off the right-hand side. You wonder if it's something they've been working on in training a little bit. And in West Ham's last 4 games, sort of going back to the beginning of November, Wan-Bissaka is 3rd in terms of their expected goals, with only Danny Ings and Mikel Antonio ahead of him. So that means he's ahead of the likes of Paqueta, Bowen, Somerville, whoever else has been in there. He is third overall. And with, a trip to Leicester, if Leicester turn out in any way similar to how they did against Brentford yesterday, then it could be another game in which he gets a lot of joy. I'd say I know he'll be popular because of the way he's going to show up on the form list at the moment. And to be honest, I don't blame you. It's also not a bad shout for a fundamental defensive clean sheet. As you'll see in my predictions later on, I'm not going to predict Jamie Vardy starts that midweek game because I don't think he'll be able to handle doing 3 matches in the space of about 8 days. So, it could be a very good chance for a West Ham clean sheet, even if he doesn't get another goal, which would more than double his career tally for the season in the space of just a few games. And the final one is Joe Gomez. We saw him preferred over Quansah today, deputising for Konate. Still no firm news on how long Konate is going to be out for, but it looks like we could be seeing a little bit more of Joe Gomez, and looked very good against Van Dijk, against what has to be said is not going to be the most potent Manchester City performance they're likely to come against. But I think there's no reason why we won't see the same back four start on in midweek. Into midfield, and obviously a couple of names there at the top of the list that we have to get into. The first one is Kevin Schade for Brentford. Ownership currently stands at just 1%. And if we look at his figures from the game yesterday, non-penalty expected goal involvement of 1.85 is the highest at the time of prepping for this. I'm pretty sure nobody from the fixtures today will beat that, but I can double check later. A hat-trick is obviously very difficult to ignore, but there is still the looming threat of Igor Thiago coming back from injury. But what a way to kind of reintroduce yourself or re-stamp some authority on a claim to the starting 11, even with that looming threat, as I said, of Thiago coming back. Yeah, what better way to do that than to score a Premier League hat-trick? And with no reliance on penalty kicks. Listeners of the podcast will know how much of a fan I've been of Schade in pre-season and even at times in the early season too, almost to the point where it's probably becoming a bit of a joke. But it's really hard to know what to say right now, especially going into the midweek game week where rotation, as is baked in anyway. It would not surprise me if he doesn't start on Wednesday. Then again, I don't know, for a player like him who has kind of been waiting for that spark moment, if you were to bench him, in midweek, I'm not sure what that would do for him. The only thing, as I say, it just depends how healthy everybody is. That's the main thing. If he didn't start in midweek, then he would 100% start at the weekend. So, yeah, I know his ownership is going to surge. It was a massive hat-trick for WAIVER FC in my main league. So, difficult to ignore a player like that. And as you all know, someone that I do personally really, really like and think he could find his way into a regular starting spot there. The second one, who the other hat-trick hero from yesterday, and actually was another hat-trick hero for WAIVER FC in our main league, was Kluivert. Now, I was pretty surprised when putting the numbers together today to see that his ownership is up to 34%, which is a lot higher than I expected. But I suppose a penalty taker has to hold value in larger than average leagues. He is the other one we have to touch on, of course, say after Schade. But interestingly, all the penalties were won by Evan Nilsson being fouled. All of Kluivert's XG yesterday came off the penalty spot. And, as you'll always hear, I like non-penalty expected stats because they're far more predictive of performance week to week. Penalties are so unpredictable, and teams that end up getting lots, season to season is not consistent. 3 in a week is a lot of luck to use up at once. And as I say, from Kluivert's 5 goals now this season, 4 of them have come from the penalty spot. So don't get me wrong, I'm not saying he's a bad pick, but if you're just looking at these players based on what they did yesterday, I'm more impressed by the performance of Schade than I am of Kluivert. But I think, both probably need to find their way into teams, especially if you're in like a 10-team league. Even an 8-team league, I think at the moment it's hard to ignore that kind of spark in form that both have showed from yesterday. The other one that's showing a little spark in form, and say another week in which we mention him on the pod, is Enzo Fernandez. Another goal to really put his name in the headlines again. Last week he was in hidden gem territory but he was the 9th most wavered in player before this weekend, and so ownership now stands up at 17% in 10-team leagues. I expect that to rise again. The only doubt, of course, is the fact that it's a midweek, and the rotations in there. But given the form he's in, with the trip to Southampton, I don't think you can really drop him. But even if he did get dropped, again, I think he's the sort of player that if you're in a 10-team league, probably needs to be in somebody's team. Next is Amad Diallo, another player we have to mention again after a couple more assists to make it 4 in the space of just 3 game weeks. Looks to have really nailed down that right wing-back spot in the new system at United. Unsurprisingly, the ownership is well up there above the 2/3 mark because of just how popular Man United players tend to be anyway. But if he was available, he's a player that I would be interested in. The other one, again, we mentioned him last week, but just another reminder, Kudus is now back available for West Ham after his ban, and with that trip to Leicester at the King Power Stadium, a very worthwhile pickup if he was there, because I think Somerville has done absolutely nothing to solidify his spot in the team, and Leicester look very, very frail at the back. The last one on the list is Curtis Jones, ownership to 32% now. And I think if you want a 1-week streamer for what is the best team in the league right now, I'm 99% sure that Jones will start in midweek, before we see probably a return to a similar 11 the following Saturday for the Merseyside derby, a similar 11 to the one we saw today against Manchester City. But yeah, I'm pretty sure Jones will get some rotation minutes and a starting spot in midweek. The other ones to discuss who I haven't actually put on the tables here is just a sort of a general look at the Chelsea attack, because I think we should expect to see a bit more rotation in midweek with the attackers. I said before the international break that I don't think it will be long before we see Sancho and Neto line up on opposing flanks, and we saw it for the first time today against Aston Villa. I don't think we'll go sort of and see a full Europa Conference League squad swap in midweek, but I think for the likes of Joao Felix and Nkunku, they'll certainly be eyeing up chance to start a Premier League game, especially with a trip to Southampton as a proper chance to show what they're about. Nkunku's ownership in 10-team leagues is down to just 32%. Arguably, you could say still quite high considering the lack of game time he has had. And Felix's ownership is down at around 18%. Though he did actually have a little uptick in his ownership this weekend, interestingly. But whether the likes of Mudryk and those guys all come in, we'll have to wait and see. I'd be surprised if it's, as I said, a full swap out of that front four, but you never know. They say, technically, a trip to Southampton is not a difficult matchup on paper, and they may see it as a very good opportunity to continue their midweek cycling as they have done in Europe. And then finally, onto the forwards. Strand Larsen won't get quite the same eyes on him and the same plaudits as Evanilson did this week, but as someone that's been very vocal in my preference of Evanilson over Strand Larsen, I have to say I'm getting more and more impressed with Larsen the more I see of him. And, the facts stand as they are, that if you look over the last month or two, he has been the most productive big Norwegian striker in the Premier League, which is a big accomplishment. Him and Cunha remain the only credible Wolves players, I think, to own for their upcoming run. After mentioning their defence in the last episode, I would honestly cut your losses now if you picked up any of them, and I did in one of my teams. Their defenders are just not good at the moment, and it says a lot that they started the game with Lemina at centre-back when they had Dawson and Bueno on the bench. So also, Dawson was very personally culpable for that last penalty that they conceded. And judging by Gary O'Neill's kind of post-match comments, I think Dawson could very much find himself on the bench again in midweek. But say it's not a good look when you're seeing so much rotation and so many combinations in defence. It really just shows that O'Neill has no idea who his strongest and most secure backline is at the moment. So generally not a good look. And if you can't rely on the likes of Dawson starting a game, then they are definitely not worth having in draft. Next is Muniz, who again I've put on the list because he will be in my predicted lineup for midweek. Ownership at 57%. A game at home to Brighton. I was really impressed with Fulham today. They were very good value for their point against Spurs. In fact, arguably probably should have won the game. I just don't think they're going to risk playing Jimenez 3 games in a week. So fully expect Muniz to get a start in that one. And then for exactly the same reasons, and as I've already mentioned earlier in the episode, I think Daka will get a start in midweek over Jamie Vardy because his legs are not going to be up for starting 3 in the space of about 8 days either. Daka is plenty available, even in some quite large leagues, just 5% owned in 10-team leagues. And I say a home game against West Ham shouldn't be too bad for their attackers. And I'm about 99% sure Daka will get a start. So for those that are streaming strikers, he's definitely one to look at as well. So that's it for the player picks. As I said, just going to reiterate again how important I think the predicted lineups are going to be. So keep an ear out for any injury news, team news, any info you have really to go on for midweek. And say I'll comb through all of the minutes and the substitutes, because sometimes you can read into players that have come off pre-60 minutes at the weekend that it's a sign they're being saved for midweek. So I'll comb through everything. I'll put together my best guess tonight. Highly unlikely I get a chance to kind of redraft those, because, say, the waiver deadline is now less than 24 hours to go before Monday. So I'll put my best guess together this evening, but have a look at some other predicted lineups out there. There will be a huge amount of variability across different sites this week. So use your own intuition as well, as always, and just, I think if you see ours and if maybe a few other of the sites all predicting similar changes, then that's as good a pick as you can come by. So that is it for this episode. Reminder again, the waiver deadline is Monday evening UK time, 6 o'clock, before the main game week deadline on Tuesday evening. If you like what we do, make sure you're subscribed if you're watching on YouTube, and give us a thumbs up. We'll try and respond to a lot of the comments before the waiver deadline tomorrow as well. For those listening on the audio, make sure you're subscribed to whichever podcasting platform you listen to, so you don't miss out on any of these future episodes as they drop. For example, episodes like this one today, which isn't coming out at the usual time and you might not be looking out for. So if you weren't subscribed, you may not see it and you may miss it, especially with the tight turnarounds. And there are going to be a few tight turnarounds as we head towards the Christmas and New Year period. So best of luck for your matchups. As I said, do not forget to pencil some waivers in. If you've got a busy day tomorrow, put them in this evening. And as always, until next time, stay shook.